Chronicle.
But what's been the difference for you, mainly in the second halves, between home and the road? I guess with the smaller crowds and no crowds, that was thought maybe to be kind of more of an equalizer. But what has been the difference for y'all at home and on the road, outside of, obviously competition as well?
Specific to the SEC, Brent, I don't think in either road game we've been near competitive enough for the ambiance to matter. I thought we competed against Auburn relative to the things that we have to do in order to have a chance to win. Our turnover rate was still way too high. It's just stereotypically speaking, it's strange. Like I asked Frank before the game, how many people are you guys allowing in here? And he was like, I don't even know. What are y'all doing? And I said, yeah, I guess I shouldn't ask a question if I can't even answer it for myself. Like, I don't know. And we're thankful for those that come. I'm not being negative in that regard, but like relative to the atmosphere that you attend a game or that I attend a game, it's not that. So it's a little bit like how you have a scrimmage in the preseason. Obviously, we couldn't do that this year, but there's a few people around, but that everything you say can be heard. It's even the bench is strange, like you're used to as a coach looking to your right at home and looking to your left on the road, and you see your crew. And now it's like, where is he? Because of the social distancing. So I don't know that home court advantage necessarily is in play this year. I think it may over time end up being a more true telltale sign of where you're at, because yes, you have to travel there. Yes, you're sleeping in a different bed, and that's part of it. But relative to the game atmosphere, I don't know that that's necessarily going to sway anything.
Gotcha. And also, how nice is it to have a representative, recruiting and otherwise, a representative like Alex Caruso in the NBA to represent Texas A&M as well?
Yeah, I would say this, and it's not to take away from his talent at all. Obviously, I've known him since he was very young when he was a ball boy here, and have the utmost respect. His dad's one of the best administrators I've been around in my career. I think how he represents Texas A&M is just as great as the representation of his talent playing in the NBA. He was able to come by for a couple of days throughout the holidays, and we were able to social distance, and I could see him and spend a little bit of time with him. But he represents all we want our program to be. But at the same time, I would say for all Aggies, he represents what we want to be, whether we're a basketball player or not.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, the next question is from Owen Buchanan from Texags.
Hi, Buzz. A couple of things. First of all, just how concerned or your level of concern would you have for the slump that Savion appears to be in right now? And then also your thoughts on Jackson Robinson's role moving forward.
Well, I thought Jax played well at LSU. He made 2 shots that helped. The thing that helped us the most was he had 7 rebounds. Save is one of the best kids I've ever been around. As you know, very intelligent, not only on the floor, but off the floor. He'll make shots. He works diligently on his game when coaches are not around. What we need Savion to do is the same thing that I just mentioned about Jax in Baton Rouge. We need him to have more of a presence on the glass. Sometimes shots will go, sometimes shots won't go. You hope you make them more than you miss them. But we have an issue as a team on the glass, and we need Savion through 3 games. I think Save had 1 rebound against LSU, 1 rebound against Auburn, and then he had 3 against South Carolina. So we need to have a minimum of 5 per game, not 5 every 3 game total. So that's not just Savion. That would be everybody. particularly our guys that Olin, we call them go-gets, when we shoot, who's going to get it on the offensive glass. And Savion and Jax are both that. If you get enough of those, sometimes you'll get it and you'll be able to score it right away. And I think that's always a sign of your involvement in the game. Jax has only had 2 rebounds since Baton Rouge. And so the consistency that we need, not just from Jax or from Savion, we need more of a presence on the glass on both ends for sure.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Coach.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move on to Travis Brown from the Eagle.
Coach, I know after the game the other day, we talked a lot about kind of the statistics behind the loss. I know that's been something that you talk about frequently. When did having this kind of deeper mathematical approach come into play for you as a coach, and how much of importance do you, I know stats are an important part of the game, but to kind of really look at the way to win a game is this kind of equation?
Yeah, Travis, I try not to show all of that stuff. It's like, why do you wear a vest? I wear a vest so the people will quit talking about I sweat so much, because that's just silly to me. I understand that it should be maybe a portion of the topic of conversation. But early in my career, when I would answer a question the way I answered yours on Wednesday, it became like this jumbled up opinion of how I answered the question. So not that I'm scared to tell you what I think. I've just tried to shy away from maybe revealing how I think and how we study and what we correlate to winning. I only said that to you because, in my opinion, I think you're a good human being, and I think you take pride in your job. So you study before you ask a question. And so I respect people in any walk of life that do that. As succinctly as possible to answer your question, I think numbers are good for kids of this generation, because I think you can use numbers to teach. Sometimes when you just holler and scream and say, run through the brick wall, that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't mean that's good. That doesn't mean that it's bad. But I think when you can teach the why of something, you always have more ownership. And so a lot of what we do in film, and we probably spend more time studying film than most, is we try to explain the why using numbers so there's evidence for them to understand. So we do 1 day before the day before the game. We do 2 days before the game, as you know. And this morning and 1 day before, we compared and contrasted, specific to your question from Wednesday night, that those numbers at Tennessee last year versus our numbers against at South Carolina this year. So you can look those numbers up, but it tells a story and it explains why we were able to win at Tennessee while only shooting 30%, and why we were just completely manhandled at South Carolina, but also why was it only a 2-possession game at halftime, and why did you lose by 18 in the second half? And the things that you have heard me talk about this year, those are the 2 reasons why. But I think there's numbers that are more significant than just what's in a box score. And I think it's my responsibility, particularly with kids that you want to coach and develop over a 4-year span of time. The earlier you can teach the why and they can understand the numbers behind it, the better. And so we do whiteboard stats. That's 9 different categories of things that we study. Only 2 or 3 of those, Travis, would they be derived exclusively from a box score. There's 6 or 7 of them that are numbers kind of under the numbers, layers to this, as a kid would say. And so I think I've been like that for a long time. My dad is very, very intelligent when it comes to numbers. And so he taught me a lot when I was growing up specific to numbers. And I just think that's some sort of way kind of how my brain's wired.
Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Next up is John Wilson from KBTX.
Coach, what makes this Tennessee team go and makes them difficult to deal with, and what challenges specifically will they present tomorrow?
I haven't studied all of Coach Barnes's team. Obviously, he's one of my heroes in the coaching world, but I was too young to really know much about his teams at Providence or even Clemson. Followed it a lot at Texas. I was kind of starting to figure out what coaching was. I would say this is one of Coach's better teams in his career. There's not a player like Kevin Durant on the team, but I think in regards to what he thinks is important and how he would like to construct the team relative to skill, talent, age, how they play on both ends of the floor, they execute at a very high level. Some of the things without going back to what Travis was talking about, some of the things that we study, they're top 30 or top 40 in every single category that we think is important to winning. And I think they're good enough to win the national championship. I know that they started the season on a pause. Sometimes that, all the time, I think we're all chasing a ghost in regards to the virus somewhat. So I don't even know that they've hit their peak in regards to how good they'll be, but they present a challenge to us in every possible way. The two biggest would be our turnover rate is bottom 30 in the country, and their turnover rate forced. So when they're on defense, they're top 30. And then the same is true in our defensive rebounding percentage. We're bottom 100, and they're top 30 in offensive rebound percentage. So those two specific stats, I think, will tell the story of the game. Like last year, we had 46 rebounds, and they had 21. And with that being said, I think we shot 9 more balls than they did, but we also shot 29 free throws. And so that just speaks to our involvement in that game. And it was still a 2-possession game. I think those two stats, not just Tennessee, but for sure Tennessee, I think it'll end up being the stats that matter to us the most over the next 15 conference games.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move to Andrew Hattersley from Gig'em 247, and then Mike Lucas.
Yeah, Coach, moving off of a game like Wednesday, what's the key to bouncing back against, especially when a team like Tennessee is coming in on Saturday, and how quickly do you kind of put the loss against South Carolina behind you?
Well, Andrew, just to be transparent with you, we spent all day yesterday talking about what transpired in D.C. on Wednesday. So we did not practice yesterday. We did not watch tape of South Carolina, nor did we watch tape of Tennessee. So we were not on the court at all yesterday. I don't know if that's the right thing to do as a coach, but in my heart, I thought it was the right thing to do as a human being. So we spent 3 hours talking about, discussing, showing some things that took place on Wednesday that I was not able to address on Wednesday. And then we met this morning, touched on South Carolina without watching tape. But we did, it's a statistic that one of my coaches, similar to football, where there's position coaches, one of my coaches, we call him the rebounding coach. And so there's a report card on things that we study and different ways that you're graded on each possession, on offense and defense, specific only to rebounding. We call that rebounding effort, and we do that after every game. So that was specific to South Carolina. And then we talked about some of those same things relative to the Tennessee game last year. So I think the emotion of all that happened in DC and the things that have transpired in our country over the last 7 months and how it impacts our players' hearts and lives and families, I think that was the priority, even more so than the bad loss at South Carolina. And in my opinion, the best team we will have played thus far tomorrow afternoon.
Appreciate it, Coach. Thanks.
All right, let's move to Mike Lucas, and then we have a follow-up from Travis Brown.
Hey, Coach, this may sound too simple, but can you coach consistency, or is that just something a team develops throughout the season?
I'm getting a lot of reps of it. I'm thankful to be here, thankful for the guys in our program. I haven't had this problem as a head coach relative to the inconsistency that we're finding. Having said that, and being in defense of our guys, we also haven't lived through the last 9 months like any other time. And so everybody processes that differently. And we've tried to make the opportunity to learn from all of this, the priority and what we do with their safety and health, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally being number one. So similar to your life, I would assume for sure in mine, there's been such a great amount of change that within that change, trying to find consistency has been difficult. And we know when we're being consistent, and our players actually know. There's nothing that we're saying or nothing that we're showing Mike that they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And there's nothing that we're saying that catches them off guard. It's pretty much the same message. Maybe sometimes we change the words, but have the same message. But that's what we've got to figure out in order to have a chance to be in a game, is we've got to have some level of consistency. Like our turnover rate was atrocious against Auburn, but our rebounding wasn't. And the other thing was, the reason our rebounding effort was good was because of the consistency and how we competed and the togetherness in the spirit in which we fought in the game. And those were not apparent against TCU, not apparent against LSU or South Carolina. So it's not just the numbers. I think the numbers, it's kind of like, the outcome we're all aware of. I think the input, kind of like when you turn on the TV and you just had it on the DVR or some other deal, and you have to hit the button so that you can get to the right input to get it back to the channel you want to watch. And you can tell by my example, I'm not very technologically sound, but I know where the input button is because I know which screen I'm trying to go to. And that has been our problem. Yes, we want to win. Yes, we understand the outcome, but our input has got to become consistent in order for the outcome to be what we want.
Thanks, Coach.
All right, we'll wrap it up with Travis Brown from the Eagle.
Yeah, just following up real quick on the other thing too, and I don't know if this is something you put out there or wanting to put out there, but what are the 9 whiteboard stats that y'all track?
Yeah, I want to be a little cautious on that, Travis, just because it's kind of what's the word that smart people use? Like we have the formula and a proprietorship, not a patent.
Proprietary
but
information.
Yeah, that word. Tweet out that word because I like you, but I just don't want to say all of that. Maybe someday when we can be face to face, I would do a better job showing it to you because then it would make more sense. And I could almost show it to you the way I teach our players whiteboard stats before the season ever starts. Mm-hmm. And we use clips like possessions, clips of games to teach it to them. And then like old school, like when you were in 4th grade, on a sheet of paper, you write in the number and you have lines. We do it. The reason why it's called whiteboard is when we were at the University of New Orleans, that was the only thing you could write on was mm-hmm. a whiteboard. And even with all the technology we have now, I still make our guys write it down on their own sheet of paper, and they start averaging non-conference numbers halfway through conference numbers. And I have all of those whiteboard stats from every game that I've ever coached. Like, I don't know how to show it to you on a Zoom. Some of the people that watch the Zoom always say that my eye contact's bad. So when you guys are talking, I'm trying to focus on this camera, but here's I don't know if you guys can see it, but you see all those red numbers. Red means it was bad. We didn't meet our goal. Yellow means it was close. Green means we won. And here are the 9 categories that we call whiteboard stats. And then these are our special teams numbers. I don't have a problem explaining that to you. Special teams is free throw make versus free throw attempt. The middle number is out of bounds. Out of bounds meaning it's Travis's ball, out of bounds under that possession, and then out of bounds for us. And then this number over here, I guess I'm messing up. Over here is ATO. And so there's two different ATO numbers we study. The ATO that you would think like it was 10-8, the first ATO against TCU. It was 7-7 first ATO against LSU. That's kind of the number that is in the public world. Our ATO number is this. Travis and Buzz are coming out of a timeout, and no matter whose ball it is, we play one possession of offense, one possession of defense. And that's the only ATO number we track, but we track it every, what we call in our program, out of a pause. So if you, this is, sorry, I just want to make sure I'm thorough in how I explain it. All possessions last year in the SEC coming out of a pause, the total was 19.9% of the game. So if you think about the first possession of the game is out of a pause, the first possession of halftime out of a pause, 4 media timeouts in the first half, 4 media timeouts in the second half. Each team has 4 timeouts. Typically speaking, 6 of the 8 are always used. But if you only tracked that down back, typically that's the story of the game. And of the special teams, ATO, out of bounds, free throw make versus free throw attempt, if you win all 3 of those categories, you're going to win 70% of your game. That's before we get into some of this other stuff. And again, I don't know if I'm showing this the right way, but you see over here, right there, you see where it's red in those first 4. That meant it was never a game against South Carolina. That's what that meant. And then these next 2 categories, one is, you've heard me say box touches. That's a defensive term for us. The next one is paint touches. That's an offensive term for us. And so you see how both of those were red. Okay, well, relative to how we're wired and how we teach and how we're coaching, you have no chance. You're not going to win that game. But if you didn't want to get lost in all of that, and sometimes that's too much for a young player on our team, and you only talked about special teams, the special teams would be, like when you wrote your thesis for your dissertation, if they only read your thesis, that would be the summary of your dissertation. That second page is pretty much our thesis.
Coach, I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
All right, that's all the questions we have for you, Coach.
Okay, thank you, guys. Happy Thanksgiving. Brent, glad football's over. Good to see you, man. See you guys.